What's up, women's sports fans, and welcome back to the main event. I'm Tasha Pierce, and today we're going to be talking about the news that is coming out of the WNBA, Project B, and Unrivaled. We are going to start with Project B and Nneka Ogwumike. Nneka Ogwumike decided she's going to make things a little interesting. So, at a moment when the WNBA is knee-deep in collective bargaining talks, Nneka became the first publicly announced player to sign with Project B. Now, Project B is a brand new women's basketball league and is set to launch in the later months of 2026. Now, it's the kind of move that makes everybody who's paying attention sit up a little straighter, because Nneka is not just a future Hall of Famer. She's not just an influential WNBA player. She's also the president of the Players Union and one of the most respected leaders in the sport. Now, Project B sees itself as a global women's basketball circuit. 6 teams, 11 players per team, 7 tournaments in major cities across the world, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Now, the season is scheduled to run from November through April. So, in effect, players can still play in the WNBA. That timing is not something that's accidental. It treats the world like an open gym, and it treats elite players like they deserve the runway to operate internationally. So this is not going to force them to choose between one league or another. That is in the case of the WNBA. But as I've said, it's going to run from November to April. So it will bump into Unrivaled, right? Okay, so the sales pitch for Project B is very simple. Better salaries than the WNBA, player equity, ownership stakes, a structure that is inspired by the tech industry. So workers can also be owners, and that is very attractive. Nneka actually called this equity piece striking, and you can tell it genuinely moves her. This is something that she thinks should be a standard. Ownership has been a talking point in women's sports for years, but Project B is trying to make it real by putting it in the contracts. Now, behind the curtain, you got a pair of tech veterans. You got Grady Burnett and Jeff Prentice guiding the business side of things, the strategy of the business. On the basketball side, Alana Beard is running the competitive side of the operation. The investor list is celebrity packed. It's a who's who of pro sports. You got Candace Parker, Novak Djokovic, Sloane Stevens, Steve Young. They're all taking a piece of the pie. The whole thing is built to feel global. It's built to feel premium, like a World Tour Champions League style event. And it makes you feel like, okay, if these two things had a baby, this is what Project B would be. Now, there's still tension. The WNBA, again, is still in extended CBA negotiations, and the players are pushing for what anybody who watches the sport knows that they deserve. They want higher salaries. They want revenue sharing. They want better conditions. They want more transparency, more agency. And right as these talks are stretching on, here comes a league promising bigger checks and a slice of ownership. That's not a coincidence, and everybody in the room knows it. They are striking when the iron is hot. So this doesn't mean that Nneka or any of the other players who are signed to Project B, because yes, Nneka is the first publicly announced player. But behind the scenes, there are other players who are already signed to Project B. So these players are not abandoning the WNBA. Project B is not positioned as a rival league. It's positioned as the other half of a year-long career. But Nneka's involvement does send a message. It tells the WNBA that the elite talent in the league has options because Project B is going to have to fill those 66 roster spots. So it gives the union more leverage during a critical moment in labor history for the sport. And it sets the stage for the next evolution of professional women's basketball, where players don't have to choose between salary and self preservation. There are still pros and cons that is worth sitting with, worth spending a little time on. The upside is obvious. Players could finally get to treat their career like a full time job with full time pay. Equity changes the power dynamic because owners can no longer pretend that players are replaceable little widgets. The global format introduces the sport to new and bigger markets. And having a respected leader like Nneka attach her name gives Project B instant credibility. But the risk side of the ledger matters too. A global league of this scale is expensive. Now, the sustainability question is going to hang into the air. The sustainability question is going to hang in the air until the first tip off. If players try to pull double duty, that means heavier workloads. That means more travel. That means more chances for injury. We saw an injury riddled WNBA season this past season. What would another 5-6 month league do as far as wear and tear injuries on the players? So that's something else that we need to consider. And the fact that you would have all of these different leagues operating at the same time will confuse a person who is kind of a casual fan. It's going to stretch the resources thin, and it could lead to some type of fatigue where people just say, you know what? It's too much happening. I will just pull away. That's already a challenge for Unrivaled as it builds its own footprint in the basketball world. Project B, offering higher salaries, could make the competition for talent even sharper because 66 roster spots for Project B, that's 66 people who won't be going to Unrivaled, right? Because the leagues kind of the leagues crash into one another right now. Now, I'm pretty sure Unrivaled is going to make some adjustments with the intro of this new league, but that's something that still needs to be considered. 66 roster spots will be filled for Project B, and we already have like 150 some odd roster spots being filled for the WNBA. So, would we still have 50 players for Unrivaled? I'm not 100% sure. We do have the beginnings of the Upshot League, which is billing itself as a kind of G League, a developmental league for the WNBA, but I guess you could still use it as a developmental league for Project B and for Unrivaled. And then we have Athletes Unlimited, and they have kind of carved out their own little niche. They're not trying to be the same thing, much like Unrivaled. They're not trying to be the same product as the WNBA puts out, but very similar. So we do still have those feeder organizations, the Upshot and maybe Athletes Unlimited, but think about how diluted the talent pool could be if all of these leagues are kind of jumping off at the same time. Because again, even though we don't want to think about it, there could be injuries, much like we saw with Caitlin Clark, which ended up being a season ending injury. What would the wear and tear on an athlete's body do to them if they're playing at a competitively high level all year round? Now, the WNBA, for its part, can't afford to view Project B as a threat. The smarter read for them would be that we are watching the next frontier, more leagues, more formats, and more money. It's the same thing men's basketball has had for decades. Choice. That is what progress looks like. Now, Nneka's move is a signal flare. It tells us that the players are done waiting for the market to catch up to their value. It tells us the future of women's basketball is going to be shaped by the athletes themselves. And it hints at a world where the WNBA, Project B, Unrivaled, Upshot, Athletes Unlimited all coexists as pieces of a larger ecosystem rather than competitors fighting over the same patch of ground, the same piece of meat. The most important part of this story is the simplest. Nneka is betting on herself and on the future of her sport. And when she places that kind of bet, that could shift the entire landscape. Now, of course, there are other questions that need to be answered, and I guess we will be keeping our eye on in the future. That is like, what are the actual salary and equity numbers? Are they meaningful amounts or are they symbolic? Is it like, I just want to be $10 more than the WNBA? No, we need something meaningful as far as equity and salary is concerned. And how's the WNBA going to respond in the CBA negotiations? I mean, we know that they're not going to initially offer any ownership stakes, but that rev share is starting to sound a whole lot better. Um, will fans embrace the new format in a global tour? I think a lot of fans are going to go wherever their favorite player goes, but the WNBA builds local team identity. So is that going to still dominate? Meaning, for right now, I'm in Houston, we don't have a team, right? But if Houston gets a team, which we know that that's coming in the near future, if Houston gets a team again, would it be better for me mentally to invest in the local side of things? Or would I follow a player like Nneka Ogwumike wherever she goes on the global tour, even though these two leagues are not intersecting? You know what I'm saying? And of course, injuries, fatigue, travel strain. How is the scheduling going to work? And for Unrivaled and other leagues, will there be collaboration, maybe cross marketing, or are we going to completely take this to competition level where now the talent is being fragmented? We're getting a more diluted product because all of the top athletes will be spoken for in other leagues. So these are questions that I still have and I'm still going to keep my eye on. As we get answers, I guess I'll talk about those a little bit more. But that is what I've got on NECA and Project B. Let's talk Unrivaled. Because the roster reveal last night gave us so much to chew on. Some teams came out looking very familiar at the end of the roster reveal, almost like they picked up right where they left off last season. Others showed up looking brand new, like they tore the blueprint in half and started almost fresh. For me, the real action was with the expansion teams. The Breeze and the Hive did not just draft well, they made statements. They walked into the room like they owned the place. So let's start with the Breeze. Their haul is wild. Ari McDonald running the point. Kate Martin bringing the glue and the toughness. Cameron Brink anchoring the paint with that length and that timing. Dominique Malonga as a wild card, the teenager with a grown woman's game. Rakia Jackson is ready to get buckets as she always is, and she is there presently along with Paige Beckers as the headliner because that's who she is. Then you hand that roster to new coach Noel Quinn. That is a team that's built to contend. They're not there to just play the game. They are there to contend and to contend immediately. Now, expansion doesn't really ever look this confident unless you're the Golden State Valkyries. But the Breeze, clearly, they was like, we understand the assignment. The Breeze put together a heck of a squad. Um, Malonga and Brink are going to be tough to get around in the paint. Then, if you thought that was good, the Hive went even harder. Their identity is clear. They want to attack you in waves the way an actual hive does when somebody gets too close. Monique Billings is going to run like her shoes are on fire. Sanaya Rivers brings chaos in the absolute best way. Letitia Heidemann gives them a veteran spark in the backcourt. Ezzy McMagor is the kind of defender and finisher every team wants. Sonia Citron is steady and smart. And then you drop Kelsey Mitchell on top of all of that. And that's basically like handing them a goddamn flamethrower. Rena Wakama is the coach, and she's got the kind of roster that will turn every game into a foot race. Now, I am going to talk about one returning team, and that is the Rose, the reigning champs, because they had their own headline moment. The chatter has been about Angel Reese, last season's Defensive Player of the Year, who chose not to play in Unrivaled in the WNBA offseason. Now, people was wondering how the Rose is going to fill that gap. That's a big hole. The answer came fast, y'all. They picked Shakira Austin, which is about as perfect a plug as you can find. They also picked up Suge Sutton to steady the guard rotation, and they kept the rest of the core intact. They got Chelsea Gray, Kai Copper, Lexi Hall, and Azurá Stevens all returning. Nola Henry is also back on the sideline as well, so the champs still look like the champs. Now, if you want to see the full rosters, they're up on the Unrivaled website. And while you're over there, take a look at the new jerseys for this season, y'all. They are clean, they are sharp, and you can pre-order your favorite player's number right now. Yes, they're up there for pre-order, so go ahead and rep your squad. The season is already spicy, y'all. The expansion teams came in swinging. They came to play. The champs reloaded, and the middle of the league is suddenly feeling a very, very crowded. Unrivaled is going to give us a real battle type season. And it's only November, so we still have a little while to wait before we get to Unrivaled, which is tipping off on January 5th, 2026. But let me tell you, there is no clear favorite, even though if I had to pick right now, I'm going to pick two teams that I would think will end up being our final two, and that is the Rose and the Hive. I just can't see anybody running with the Hive. And the Rose just knows how to peak at the right moments. So you tell me who's your favorite in Unrivaled if you've got one. And if you don't, watch Unrivaled because I guarantee you within the first couple of games, you will walk away with a favorite team. And I guess that's where we'll leave it at for today. We had two big stories, two major shifts in kind of the landscape, and a whole lot more coming down the pipeline. I don't have a set release schedule for these things locked in, so just keep your eye on this space. Whenever the next episode drops, you can bet it'll have the biggest stories in professional women's sports and conversations that actually matter. Thanks for rolling with me, and I'm going to catch you next time. Peace.